Well, welcome in. We're glad that you're with us. Today we have an awesome message that I'm going to be giving to you, but first we have a few announcements that we would like to give to you. First one is this: you will receive a survey, and this survey is going to be on hot topics. If you remember last summer, we did hot topics, and we're going to bring that back again. And so within the survey, though, you can only choose 3 topics. And if you would take those 3 topics, send them back to us, and then we'll tally those, and then that is going to be our next series this summer. Also, some of you were probably wondering about the TV raffle, and we are going to give the TV away. One, because I'm tired of looking at it in my garage, but so here's the name, and hopefully that person is watching, and you need to let your table leader know that you were watching, and you will get this TV. Now, if you're not watching, the second name I share will be the one that gets the TV. And if I confuse you, don't worry about it. We'll figure it out. So, Zachary Armstrong, you have won the 70-inch TV. And yes, you are in the morning time on Thursday. So, hopefully you're watching this, and let your table leader know, and we will get you that TV. But if Zachary's not watching, we have Andrew Prentice, who would be the runner-up. So sorry, Andrew, I hate to throw that out there and have you feel like, dang it, I just missed it, or maybe you're hoping right now that Zachary is not watching. So Zachary, let us know soon. If not, we will have to go to Andrew on that. But congratulations on that 70-inch TV. For our next prize, it's even going to be bigger and better. And I should have brought it with me, which is a roll of toilet paper. So that will be our next giveaway as we are trying to do bigger and better on our prizes. Also, guys, stay connected with our men's app. This is a way for you to know what is going on, and during this time of us being isolated, the men's app is a great way for you to know all the pertinent information, and we'll give you push notifications even on our Bible studies. And then if you're new, if you're watching us, and you have not been invited to one of our chat rooms, I encourage you to let us know by messaging us now, and we will assign you to a group leader. And that group leader will quickly get a hold of you and invite you into one of the Zoom conference rooms. So once we're done with this message, once I close in a word of prayer today, you will be invited to go into one of those Zoom rooms, and then we have some discussion questions for you that you guys will be able to do your discussion time for about 25 minutes. And we're still going to honor the time, just like we've done in the morning time and the evening time to the hour. And so just use that time wisely within that group, and then your table leader will close in a word of prayer. So we're starting off our new series called Job, a Man Called Persecuted. And how ironic that we are going through this series, given our situation that we are in. This is a series I've been wanting to do for a long time, given the circumstances behind Job's situation. And so for the next 7 weeks, we're going to talk about Job. We're going to talk about his life and the persecution and the trials that he has in his life. And what we're going to do is we're going to learn from his life on how to live this in a God-honoring way, the same way that Job lived his life for the Lord. And so let me open up a word of prayer and we'll get started. God, thank you. Thank you for technology, that we can come into the rooms of men in their homes, that they are watching this, and that they will be able to get some information about Job's life, and that they'll be able to apply it in their life as we are all going through some trying times now. And so, Lord, bless me as I share this message, that it might be a message that will really impact the lives of our men. And I pray this in your Son's name. Amen. Amen. So Job chapter 1, grab your Bibles and turn over to Job chapter 1, and we're going to look at Job's life and how it starts out. It starts out in verse 1 of chapter 1. It says this: "In the land of Uz there lived a man whose name was Job. This man was blameless and upright. He feared God and shunned evil. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters, and he owned 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 donkeys, and had a large number of servants. He was the greatest man among all the people of the east. So here we are setting this up on who Job is. Talking about his family. His sons used to take turns holding feasts in their homes, and they would invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. When a period of feasting had run its course, Job would send and have them purified early in the morning, and he would sacrifice a burnt offering for each of them, thinking, perhaps my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. This was Job's regular custom. So we set up this with who Job is and finding out that he is a righteous man. So now we drop down to verse 13. One day when Job's sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the oldest brother's home, a messenger came to Job and said, the oxen were plowing and the donkeys were grazing nearby, and the Sabeans attacked and carried them off. They put the servant to the sword, and I'm the only one who has escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another messenger came and said, the fire of God fell from the sky and burned up the sheep and the servants, and I'm the only one who has escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another messenger came and said, the Chaldeans formed 3 raiding parties and swept down on your camels and carried them off. They put the servant to the sword, and I'm the only one who has escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, yet another messenger came and said, your sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the oldest brother's house, when suddenly a mighty wind swept in from the desert and struck the 4 corners of the house. It collapsed on them, and they are dead, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you. Job just had the worst day of his entire life. In one day, Job lost all of his finances. He lost all of his employees. He lost those that were dear to him, his own family. And here's Job now sitting there processing this through, realizing that his whole world has collapsed. This is what is called a trial. Job has now been ushered into a trial. Now, some of you might wonder, what is a trial? Well, let me tell you what a trial is not. A trial is not a consequence. See, a consequence is if somebody goes into a bank and robs the bank, gets arrested, and is thrown in jail, and then cries out to God and says, why am I in jail? No, you're in jail because of a consequence. You robbed a bank. But if I'm walking down the street and the bank robber comes out and he runs away, and I kind of look like the bank robber, and the cops show up and they arrest me and they try me and they convict me and I go to jail, I'm crying out to God, I'm in a trial. I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't rob the bank. That's the difference between a trial and a consequence. Job is not experiencing a consequence. How do we know that? Well, in Job chapter 1, in verse 1, it says, in the land of Uz, there lived a man whose name was Job. This man was blameless and upright. So it sets up the story to say he was blameless. He was upright. Yet he's going through this trial. So what is a trial? A trial is a testing of your faith. Matter of fact, in 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 6 through 7, it says, in all this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while you may have had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. These trials have come so that the proven genuineness of your faith, of greater worth than gold, which perishes even through refined fire, may result in praise, glory, and honor when Jesus Christ is revealed. So it's saying here that when we go through a trial, our faith is shown, that the genuineness of our faith is shown through a trial. That's when our faith really shows up. It doesn't show up when we're going through life and everything goes easy. The faith doesn't show up there. Matter of fact, it says when we go through these sufferings, it says it's more precious than gold to God. That God gets the glory when we go through trials, and we do that in honoring Him. Do you remember the first time you had a trial in your life? I do. I was 20 years old. See, 20 years old, I grew up in a home where my dad owned businesses. He put me to work at the age of 13 while I was still going to school, and I loved it. He had a hardware store. He had 3 grocery stores. And I used to work in those stores, and I learned those stores frontwards and backwards. I could have ran the hardware store or the grocery store. And my dad said, you know what, son? Someday you're going to have these businesses. So I went off to college to get a business degree, and my dad paid for it. So here I am, 19 years old, actually, and I'm in college. And I was living in the dorms. I was upstairs, the second story. It's at a college called, the Master's College now is called Los Angeles Baptist College in those days. And back then, and yes, this is going to date me, there was no such thing as a cell phone. So all you had was a payphone on the wall. And whoever dorm was closest to the payphone became the answering machine, so to speak. And so basically when the phone rang, he would open up his door, he would answer it, and then the person on the end would say, hey, go to dorm number such and such and get this person. Well, I remember the night I was in my dorm room and the phone rang, and I hear the guy go, okay, one moment, and I hear the footsteps coming down the hall. And he knocks on my door, and he says, Brent, your dad's on the phone. So I get up, I go to the phone, and my dad says, and I'll never forget what he said. He said, son, this is your dad. Just want to let you know, we've declared personal bankruptcy. We've closed up all the businesses. We are moving back to Phoenix. Can't afford to put you through college anymore. We'll give you a place to stay. We'll feed you. But other than that, you're on your own. Now, for the first time in my life, I felt alone. See, I was now going through a trial. I didn't deserve it. My parents didn't deserve it. It was the economy that had everything crash. But here I was thrown into a trial. And in that trial, I realized that it feels really lonely. And I bet for a lot of you guys, as you're sitting there wondering about your job, wondering about your future, as you're isolated, maybe there's some single guys that are sitting at home watching this, and you're like, man, I feel really lonely. Well, understand, Job knows what you're going through. I know what you're going through. That in a trial, we can feel that way. Matter of fact, I remember pleading with God, almost like God didn't know what was going on, that God wasn't aware of my circumstances. God wasn't aware of the plans that I had. Yet we see here that God actually knows. See, God knows the trials that you are going through in life. How do I know that? Well, I know that through verses 6 through 12 of Job 1. See, I had jumped from chapter 1, verse 1, all the way down to verse 5, and then I jumped to 13, where at 13, here it says that everything was taken away from him. Well, that was Job's circumstances. Job never knew about verses 6 through 12. Job learned about it when he was in heaven and he realized the rest of the story. We get to read the rest of the story, but Job didn't get that story. We do. And in this story, we understand that God was in control, even though Job didn't know that he was. Job felt alone. But yet we read here in verse 6, it says this, one day the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. The Lord said to Satan, where have you come from? Satan answered the Lord, from roaming through the earth and going back and forth in it. Then the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil. Does Job fear God for nothing? Satan replied. Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has? You have blessed the work of his hands so that his flocks and herds are spread throughout the land. But stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. The Lord said to Satan, very well, then. Everything he has is in your hands, but on the man himself, do not lay a finger. So here we see that God knew exactly what was going on. God was in control of the situation. Matter of fact, God pointed this out to Satan. I'm sure Job, after reading that, was like, thanks a lot. Why did you choose me? Why did you love me that much that you had to choose me, and you didn't choose somebody else? But he was chosen for it. Here's what I want you guys to understand about this story. That God knows the situation. And God also, you are more precious to God than all his creation. So as you're struggling through a trial, understand you are so precious to him. How do I know that you're precious to him? Look at verse 8. Verse 8, he says this, "Then the Lord said to Satan, 'Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil.'" This is God bragging on Job. This is God proud of who Job is. This is God saying to Satan, "You try Job and let's see how this one works." God was proud of him. God knew how precious he was to him, but he was saying, "Go ahead, see what you can do with Job, a person who is blameless and upright." And so God knows the trials that you are going through. You are more precious to God than all creation. Look at Luke chapter 12, verse 6 through 7. It says this, "Are not 5 sparrows sold for 2 pennies? Yet not one of them is forgotten by God. Indeed, the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Don't be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows." He is saying here that he understands, he knows how many sparrows there are. He knows the number of hairs on your head. Now, I know some of you are thinking, well, for my head, that's really easy. And for others like myself, it's getting easier all the time to count the numbers of hairs on my head. But nonetheless, God knows the number. He is saying here that you are more precious than that. You're more precious than those sparrows. Another example of how we know that we are more precious to God. That he gave his son, Jesus Christ. He gave his only son, as it says in John 3:16, as a sacrifice for us because he loved us that much. And now we have a person, Jesus Christ, who he is our high priest, who can empathize with what we are going through because he's been there. He's been there before. He struggled. He had fear. He had doubts. He didn't understand what was about ready to transpire. You read all that in the story of Jesus in his life, and he went through all that, those emotions. But ultimately, he didn't sin against God. He stayed faithful to God. Hebrews 4:15 through 16 says this, "For we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weakness, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are. Yet he did not sin. Let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need." Guys, I wish I could say that when I went through my first major trial, that I didn't sin. There was probably a year in there that I was being a foolish 19-year-old that really was upset at God for really destroying my future the way I saw it. And it was at the end of that year that I realized I was still miserable, that I was wallowing in self-pity, that I was just doing anything I wanted to do. And so I went into my room and I grabbed my Bible and I opened my Bible up. And you know what chapter and you know what book I read? It was Job. See, I read Job, and when I started reading this story of Job's life, I sat there and went, who am I to complain? I got a roof over my head. I have food. I'm healthy. And here's Job, as we will see in the next couple lessons, everything that he went through. And it was in that moment that I turned to God and I said, God, I give it all to you. Whatever I have, it is yours. And the life that I wanted to live, I surrender that over to you. And I will tell you, that was the moment that started a process in my life of going into ministry. See, if my parents would have kept their businesses, I wouldn't have gone into ministry. I would have gone back up there. I would have ran their stores. I probably would have owned their stores someday. I tell people a lot, one of the best things that ever happened to our family was for them to go bankrupt, because I see what God now was doing with my life through this trial. Men, we are all going through a trial right now. I don't think any of us planned for this coronavirus to upset our lives, but it has. This is not a consequence. This is a trial. And each one of you are going to struggle with it in different ways. Some of you might lose your health over it. Some of you might lose your business over it. But here's what the real question is. The real question is, how are you going to respond to God in those circumstances? See, I wish if I could rewind it, I would have responded differently at first. But I'll tell you now, since I've been through that trial, and now that I'm going through this trial, I'm responding way differently. See, I get it. I own businesses too, and I had to close 2 of them. We haven't laid off anybody yet. We're still paying their salaries. I don't know what the future holds for those businesses right now, but I'm not worried about it. I'm trusting in God, and I know He has a plan. I know that all this is in His plan, that none of this is a surprise to Him. And so my encouragement to you today, man, is for you to really process this through. And if you're fearful, surrender that to God and say, I'm not going to live in fear anymore. I'm going to give this over to God. I'm going to worship Him, and I'm going to depend and rely on Him, knowing that He has a plan and a purpose for my life. Let's pray. God, thank you. Thank you for these men that are listening to this message. And I just pray as they now go into their different rooms that they would discuss the questions that we have and really just process this through, and how they can better learn and understand who they are in you, and that through this, that their faith might be emboldened, and that through this demonstration of their faith to others, that you might give the praise and you might get the glory for it. And I pray all this in your Son's name. Amen. So men, we're now inviting you to get into one of our Zoom rooms. We have table leaders that have invited you with a link to go to one of those Zoom chat rooms. If you have not received that link, if you would instant message us now, we will get you in contact with one of those leaders, and he can get you connected to one of those groups. But every week when we come together, after the lesson's over with, this is a way that we will have table discussions, and you'll have some questions that you guys will go through, and you'll wrestle it through. Zoom is an amazing, amazing program that allows us to communicate with each other almost like we are next to each other. And so I encourage you to do so. Have an awesome time in your groups. God bless.